Napoleon Hill had quite the reputation for being pretty scammy, as we've seen. There's so much here in this regard that I actually had trouble narrowing down which scams to share, because this could be its own deep dive on its own and is actually kind of hard to navigate which portion of this video I want to add this stuff, because literally throughout every portion of his life, he is doing something scammy. So I'm just going to do my best to kind of compile what we haven't gone over already here, now that we've gone over somewhat of a timeline for his life. Probably the biggest scam that he was a part of, which is very well documented, is kind of a knee slapper. There was an expose article on Napoleon Hill in the 1900s when he was in the thick of all of his claims, and it turns out he started a shady venture called the George Washington Institute of Advertising. And guess the year that it started. In 1909, the year after he supposedly met with Andrew Carnegie. However, this George Washington Institute of Advertising was a total scam college. The school promised to teach advertising and marketing, but charged high fees without delivering real education or job opportunities. There was a lot of legal troubles with this, and it left students feeling completely ripped off. This is so well documented, and there's so much more to go over with this as far as details, which, again, if you want to check those out, be sure to check out the description for my resources. But in short, the school pushed students to bring in new students, hinting that they could make money or get perks for doing it. How it would work is you would send in names of people that might be interested in the college, and you would get a commission for it. Sound familiar? Yeah, Napoleon Hill started an MLM scam. I do not know how many of you watched my video about MLMs or multi-level marketing companies, but in my opinion, one of the most important parts of the video was part 4 about the positive thinking books that are used in MLMs. Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, is not only a bestseller in self-help, but also a required reading, highly recommended, in most MLMs. Now, this is just one of several questionable businesses that Napster was involved in, and it made many people doubt his credibility and view him more as a con artist than a true success guru. But what made this so similar to an MLM was the recruitment process for the college. So it's no surprise that in 1912, this whole thing just fell apart and the Napster had to think of something else. I'm gonna give you the rapid fire version of this, okay? He was arrested many times and on the run throughout his life for theft, fraud, and scamming. He got arrested for stealing a car, and he even scammed a Mormon. In 1930, Napoleon Hill helped produce the first Mormon feature film, but the production faced legal issues due to his unlicensed stock scam, which led to delays, lawsuits, and of course, a box office failure. When he was married to his 5th wife, he claimed to be an advisor for President Roosevelt, scammed the whole town, and was run out of town. He impersonated being a lawyer, which even his totally and completely unbiased official biography admits that this was an exaggerated claim. They call it exaggerated, and I call it a flat-out, outright lie. Which brings me to his flat-out lies. Outside of the scams and fraud, there are just flat-out lies that Napster told to make himself look really important. One of them was in 1917 or 1918, when he was supposedly approached by President Woodrow Wilson for help with the war effort. Apparently, President Wilson was willing to pay Napoleon handsomely for his services, but Napoleon, a true patriot, and even though he was dirt broke, wouldn't take any money. According to Napoleon Hill's biography, President Wilson didn't even have an idea for what Napoleon might do to help the war. He just wanted him to be involved. However, this tale gets woven a little bit more. Let me just read you Napoleon Hill's own words about how President Wilson just thought that Napoleon Hill was the best thing since sliced bread. Quoting here, "I was sitting in President Wilson's office as he read the decoded message from them," Hill claimed. His face turned white as snow. When he finished reading, he handed the documents to me and left the room. He was gone for about 15 minutes. When he returned, he handed me a couple of sheets of paper on which he had written his reply to the Germans, which ended with 3 questions related to the terms of the armistice. Yes, you heard that right. Apparently, Napoleon Hill was about to be asked by the President of the United States for his advice on the terms of ending World War I. Well, golly gee willikers, I wonder what the Napster did. Well, let's find out. After I read his reply, he asked if I had any suggestions to add to it. I said, "Yes, Mr. President. I would suggest a 4th question. I would ask whether the request from an armistice has been made on behalf of the German people or the German warlords." "Of course," exclaimed the president, "for that will put them on notice to get rid of their Kaiser before they can get an armistice." And it did just that. Now, the biggest kicker is there's absolutely 0 evidence of Napoleon Hill ever meeting President Wilson, much less giving him advice on how to run the country. The Federal Trade Commission charged Napoleon Hill on October 1919, which is weird, considering he was supposed to be working for the president, but whatever. But he got charged for fraudulent advertising. He even created fraudulent charities, like creating charities and then stealing money from them. He had numerous unpaid debts and just flat out lies about the people that he supposedly met. However, there is one person that Napoleon Hill probably met, which would be Thomas Edison. There's even an incredibly awkward photo to prove this. However, there's a pretty convoluted story behind this as well. The short version is that Napoleon Hill basically engineered this meeting and then kind of tricked Thomas Edison into meeting with him, got the photo, and then inflated the story. In fact, the reason why Napoleon even met with him was to give Thomas Edison some sort of award for one of his scam charities that he was doing. It was a medal of some kind, which he hands to Thomas Edison, and Edison hilariously just hands it right back to Napoleon Hill. Like, he's so confused. Why are you handing this to me? I don't want this. That does not sound like a mentor or a friend to me. That sounds like somebody who's fanboying over somebody that they admire. Next, when Napoleon was married to his 5th wife, he made up a big fat lie that Gandhi wrote to him. He wrote to him asking about Napoleon's book and wanted to distribute it throughout India. Now, there's a lot more flat out lies that he told, which we will go over more of those in part 3 as they are more relevant in that section. You know what? I think it's fair to go over some pushback that I might get here. Now, with most things that I try to research, I try to find if anybody disagrees with any of this and see whatever evidence they have to the contrary. Like, with most lies, there might be some truth in there. It's like the guy who caught a fish that was as big as a whale. He might have caught a fish, and that was true, but to make himself look important and interesting, he exaggerated what actually happened into an unnecessary extreme for clout and popularity. Could this be the case with the Napster? So I have to wonder, is there anything here that's actually true that's maybe been exaggerated, or maybe not? Maybe it is just genuinely true, but because he has such a bad reputation, nobody believes him. Like, I'm pretty sure the Napoleon Hill Foundation and the Institute, they know all of this. They know about the supposed lies, the scams, and everything else. So I tried to look to see what they had, or maybe some Napoleon Hill apologists had, to back up their boy Napoleon. And of course, there are indeed some claims that they don't agree with. But interestingly, just when I didn't think it could get any worse for the Napster, in trying to give him some credit and see what his supporters have to say, I inadvertently stumbled upon something in my research. I think I stumbled upon some more proof that he's just more of a scam artist than we realized. It all started with the claim that Napoleon really did meet President William Howard Taft. Defenders of Napoleon Hill will say that there is proof for this. Apparently, when Taft was a Supreme Court justice, which was well after his presidency, it said that Taft wrote 2 letters to Napoleon Hill about his book, Law of Success. And I have some questions, and I believe that I'm within my right to ask some fair questions here, especially considering the mountain of evidence that this man is known to exaggerate, lie through his teeth, and scam people. Now let's look at the first letter. This was written in 1927, okay? Just for context, Taft was president between the years 1903 and 1913. So by 1927, Taft was a Supreme Court justice. This letter is basically Taft saying, hey, I received your book. Thanks for sending it. I'll read it if I get a chance. Pretty generic. And wow, would you look at that? There's a handy dandy signature there at the bottom. I got this image from the Napoleon Hill Foundation on Instagram. It says a lot in the caption on Instagram, but here's a snippet of what they posted along with this letter. This historical gem captures a moment of intellectual exchange between 2 influential figures, emblematic of timeless wisdom and its relevance across disciplines. The letter is housed in the Napoleon Hill Foundation World Headquarters and Archive offices in Wise, Virginia. So this letter is in the archives at the Napoleon Hill Foundation. But even so, I still kind of have to wonder, even though it looks good, has this been independently verified by researchers? Have they made the letter widely available for public examination by experts? I mean, I have to wonder because typically genuine historical documents are subjected to rigorous scrutiny, including handwriting analysis and comparison with other verified documents. Not to mention Napoleon Hill had a pattern of producing alleged letters and endorsements from prominent figures, many of which were later called into question. For example, similar letters attributed to Thomas Edison, Andrew Carnegie, just to name a few, have been criticized as either fabrications or completely taken out of context. However, I have a different perspective. I could be completely wrong, but I actually think this is a legitimate letter. But I'm also a 90s kid. And this reminds me of when I would write a letter to Christina Ricci or Candace Cameron or JTT. And I would get a letter back that would be rather generic, right? With a copy of their signature on the bottom. It would be a mass response to their fans that was sent by people hired to specifically respond to fan mail. It could just be me, but that's what this seems like to me. It's like Taft's secretary is over here like, Betty, we got another book review for Taft ready to read. Oh man, Doris, now we gotta glance over it and respond for him, to make it seem like this incredibly busy politician cares. Amen to that, Betty. Would you like to give it to him to sign? Here you go, Mr. President. Would you sign right here, please? Thank you. Continue with your insanely busy day. And don't you worry, I'll have your afternoon tea for you just right away. That's right, darling. With a donut? Oh, okay. Oh, cookies. Oh, yes, sir, right away. That's probably how that went. And knowing Napoleon Hill's patterns for exaggerating claims, I could see how getting a letter like that would be turned into something it wasn't. Now, there's also the second letter, which, by all accounts, if it was authentic, is way more important than the first. And when I was looking at it, just by chance, I noticed something odd. So let's read what this says. December 24th, 1927. My dear Mr. Hill, I thank you for sending me your Law of Success. I note one passage with which I fully agree. Every failure is a blessing in disguise, providing it teaches some needed lesson one could not have learned without it. Most so-called failures are only temporary defeats. If that were inbred, it would help, especially if it were made to apply to those who are studying expediency in politics and the yielding to popular errors and deferring to them. I shall have pleasure in looking over the introductory lesson when I have the opportunity. Sincerely yours, Taft. I don't know, man. Doris and Betty did a good job writing that up. I mean... It's just generic. That sounds generic to me. Here's the second letter that Napoleon Hill said he got from Taft in 1928. Okay, this is what it says. Dear Mr. Hill, I have now had the opportunity to finish reading your Law of Success textbooks, and I wish to express my appreciation of the splendid work you have done in the organization of this philosophy. It would be helpful if every politician in the country would assimilate and apply the 17 principles upon which your lessons are based. It contains some very fine material which every leader in every walk of life should understand. I am happy to have had the privilege of rendering you some slight measure of help in the organization of this splendid course of common sense philosophy. Now, keep in mind, this was not a small book. For somebody of this stature to stop what they're doing and read a book that's, I think it's like over 500 pages. Yeah, that's a stretch. So this quote appears in the original 1937 version of Think and Grow Rich, which I have access to and saw the quote, but I didn't see any images in any edition of the book. You know how usually they'll take like a photocopy of it? That wasn't there. Also, what's interesting is that the way that the quote ends in the original book is that it isn't from Taft. It just says that it's from a former president and former Chief Justice of the United States. But in the current updated version of Think and Grow Rich, which has been revised, it's the one that I have, all of these endorsements have been completely taken out, including the one from Taft. But as far as this letter's existence, all I found was the post from the Napoleon Hill Foundation on their Facebook page. Here's what the caption says. It says, "A historical archive letter contained in the 1937 version of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill from former President and U.S. Chief Justice William Howard Taft on Hill's contribution." But again, I'm kind of confused about this because the letter doesn't appear. It says that it's a letter contained in the book, but it's just a quote. So I don't know what that means. So if there's somebody smarter than me that maybe knows a little bit more about this, let me know in the comments or email me. But aside from this, my source for both of these letters are from the social media accounts of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And I can't help but notice something strange about them. When I look at these two letters, they look different. Do you see what I see? Do you see what I see? I'm sorry. That was really off key. Sorry about that. All right, let me put this in perspective. Let me break this down. Let's look at William Taft's signature online. It's pretty impressive, isn't it? Look how sleek and smooth and consistent his signature is. Now look at the first letter written in 1927 and compare it to the other William Taft signatures. And it looks spot on. This is actually one reason why I think it's legitimate, even if it is a generic letter. Now, let's look at this second letter written in 1928, only 1 year later, which was supposedly again written by Taft. And let's look at this signature. Guys, I am no expert, but this looks like a sloppy forged signature to me. The letterhead is not the same. The type is not the same, and I think it's very clearly obvious that this signature is not William Taft's signature. I think the Napster made this up. I think he forged his signature. And considering his scammy nature and constant lies and profession as a con man, you'd think he'd learn to forge a signature better. So my theory, at least with this one incident, is that I think that the first letter was a generic letter from the president with his signature on it. I think Napoleon Hill then took that signature and tried to forge it terribly, which, considering that the internet did not exist back then and you couldn't check, people just took his word for it. And again, not to mention the highly suspicious timeline here. Napoleon Hill's book was written in 1937. William Taft died in 1930. So again, it's the same pattern of claiming these men said and did something that cannot be completely verified because they're dead. You know, and as far as the other pushback that Napoleon Hill supporters have, where they claim there's some legitimacy with what he claims, this is typically the formula that I found when I looked into them. It's the fish that became a whale. It's like being in the audience of watching the Wright brothers flying equals him being best friends with them. Or he knows a friend who met Andrew Carnegie once, equals Hill is now intimate business associates with him. And maybe he did actually meet Thomas Edison once and even got a photo of it. But it becomes an extraordinary claim of nonsense. And I don't doubt that a generic letter from William Taft turns into them being best buddies who talk all night on the phone, braid each other's hair, giggling together. It's wash, rinse, repeat with this guy. I am genuinely not impressed with the pushback. And considering the Napster's track record, this assessment is what makes the most sense by far. Guys, I could honestly be here all day telling you about the shady dealings of Napoleon Hill, but I think that this is sufficient. You get the point. I did not expect this at all when I started my research on him. The popular narrative portrays Napoleon Hill as a victim of bad business dealings, someone who was simply too trusting for his own good. It's framed as though there's this grand conspiracy against him, or that he actually did meet these people, but then leave out valuable information about those details. However, when you consider the extensive trail of lies, theft, forged checks, shady business deals, scams, multiple arrests, it's hard not to question whether his story is just complete baloney.